Hello, I'm Dr. Clint Sexton, and today we're going to talk about the importance of diet and how it relates to your thyroid health. So, there's several different things to consider. When you're talking about your food and the diet you're consuming, you want to see how that's influencing your body in several different ways. So, one is are you providing nutrition required for the thyroid gland to make your thyroid hormones and maintain health? A really big factor to consider also is, are the things that you're eating contributing to inflammation in the body or triggering the immune system? And then the third key point you want to consider is, how are these foods affecting your ability to essentially extract energy from those foods, producing energy from them? And that can come back to things going back to blood sugar and insulin levels and things like that. So let's just start at the top, where we look at the concept of the diet and nourishing the thyroid. So to make thyroid hormone, you need some proteins. You need some tyrosine. That's an amino acid. You can find that in most protein sources you're consuming. You need a little iodine. Not a lot of people really end up having problems or deficiencies with iodine. The thyroid is really quite good at accumulating and storing and condensing iodine in the body, but making sure you're getting some of that. You want to be careful if you have autoimmune thyroid issues like Hashimoto's disease. You may want to watch that. You don't want to, consume excess iodine, because that can drive the immune response against what it's targeting, this TPO antibody, and so that enzyme is affected by iodine. So it's really not hard to meet the nutritional requirements for the thyroid itself. Where we really tend to get into trouble with the thyroid is how foods are affecting inflammation levels in the body or affecting the immune system. So this can get a little bit tricky because there's lots of different opinions on, what's a healthy food and what's not a healthy food. So is something an anti-inflammatory food or not? So when you're looking at a food, there's two things. Let's say you're looking at a food and you go, oh, this is full of, vitamins and minerals and nutrients, and this is great. So maybe you could say, like, well, hey, a tomato is great. It has lycopene, or it has, antioxidants, and this is a healthy food. Yes, standalone by itself, fine, but it's part of a group of family of plants called the nightshade. And so nightshades can be inflammatory and trigger inflammatory responses, or trigger the immune system. So it's two different things when you're talking about foods. You could say this about all kinds of things, nuts and seeds and grains and dairies in isolation. When you're not looking at how it interacts with your system, you go, yeah, it's great food. It's got proteins and fats and vitamins and minerals and all these things. But the thing you have to consider is, how does my body react to it? I mean, you can take something like gluten. All right, say, well, you can have whole wheat. That's great. Well, fine, there's nothing wrong with that, as long as your immune system does not have a problem with the protein, the gluten in it. So you can look at it however you want. You can look at just about any food and go, hey, here are all the positives, here are all the benefits, but you have to see how it interacts with your system, and is that triggering inflammation? Okay, is that triggering your immune system? And that's really important when you're talking about the thyroid, because these inflammatory responses and reactions are going to interfere with the regulation of the thyroid. So you're not only just talking about the thyroid itself, you're talking about the other organs that are controlling it. So your pituitary gland makes the TSH hormone that tells your thyroid gland to make a hormone. And if you have increased systemic inflammation or immune system reactions, it can interfere with that communication. And even above that, you have the part of your brain called your hypothalamus, and that's directing the pituitary gland, and that does not do well if we have increased inflammation or immunological responses. So when we're talking about diet, I tend to, make sure we're getting the basic nutrition for the thyroid itself to make thyroid hormone. But after that, the majority of it is, okay, we want to create a nice environment where we're not constantly triggering immune system responses. And a lot of those foods can be considered healthy foods or even superfoods, but we're not talking about what they contain in terms of nutrients and nutrition. We're talking about, how does your system respond and react to it. Okay. Now, the third thing we look at is energy production from the concept of glucose or blood sugar control. So we don't, eating a lot of high sugar, high carbohydrate foods can be problematic for people. So if you know that you have blood sugar problems, meaning it runs a little too high, or maybe your insulin's running a little too high and you have some insulin resistance, you don't want to gravitate towards higher carbohydrate, because that's going to decrease the efficiency of your body's ability to take the food you're eating, get it into your cells, and making energy. You have to remember that anytime we're talking about thyroid, that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about energy production. So the thyroid is making hormones that essentially allow us to make energy. So the hormones interact with our cells, and we have to have nutrients, the food we're eating getting into the cell. And then from there, it has to go deeper into the cell and go to something called mitochondria. And it's this whole process of thyroid hormone and the proper balance of nutrients coming into the cell, and then these nutrients ultimately being converted into energy, and that's occurring in those mitochondria. But the things that we're eating influence this whole process. So the basics with your diet are, you want to say, okay, I'm getting the basic nutrients I need to make thyroid hormone. This is a low inflammatory, immune friendly diet, foods that I'm eating, and I'm eating my macronutrients, my proteins, my fats, and my carbohydrates, and all in ratios that are working well with my body. And it's easier to sort some of these things out if you know more about how your body's processing things. So if your inflammation levels are higher, you may see that on a CRP, or high sensitivity CRP, reactive protein test. If you see that your hemoglobin A1C, that's an assessment of your blood sugar over about the last 3 months. If that's up, you go, hey, I'm not, blood sugar's running too high too much of the time. Or if you do the calculation with your fasting insulin, with your fasting glucose, to see if we have some insulin resistance going on, go, okay, I need to work with my ratios of my macronutrients so that I can get that to a healthier level. You can gather data about, how the liver's working, and you can see what your stress, hormone levels like, all these. So the more you know about what's going on, it helps you to select and dial in a type of eating or a type of dietary plan to follow to optimize your thyroid function. So hopefully you get the concepts. Yep, you got to nourish the thyroid, but the biggest piece, and the piece that gets missed, and where people get confused on, and where there's conflicting information, is, well, what's a good food for my system, particularly from an inflammatory perspective or an immune system perspective, something triggering that. And I'm not talking about junk food or processed, highly processed foods, refined foods. Yeah, those aren't good. I'm talking about, there are many foods that are considered healthy that may not be the best for you, just because that's just how your body responds and reacts to it. Okay, so hopefully this is helpful. It's really hard to give a lot of specifics on it, because everyone's a little bit different, but these are the concepts you want to gravitate towards when determining what kind of dietary plan you want to follow to optimize your thyroid function. All right, I hope you found this helpful. Thank you.